The sun is setting, and the sky glows with soft orange light. A big house stands tall, covered in twinkling holiday lights. Inside, the smell of fresh cookies fills the air. Laughter and music make the home feel warm and happy. A black car stops in the driveway. The door opens, and Robert steps out with his wife and young son Ethan. Robert is a tall man with sharp eyes. He looks around and smirks. "Ah, finally, a real house," he says proudly. As they walk inside, David, the host, greets them with a big smile. "Welcome, cousin. It's been too long." He shakes Robert's hand. Robert looks around the beautiful home and nods. But then, his eyes stop at Aisha, a young black maid setting the dinner table. Robert frowns and leans toward David. In a low voice he says, "Oh, you still have a maid. I thought you people believed in equality now." He chuckles. David says nothing, just smiles politely. Aisha hears Robert's words but stays quiet. Her hands pause for a second, then she continues setting the plates. The smile on her face fades a little, but she keeps working. The night is just beginning. Robert thinks he is the most important man in the room. But soon, he will learn a lesson he will never forget. Dinner is ready, and everyone gathers around the big dining table. The food looks delicious: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and warm bread. Aisha moves around the table, serving the guests with care. She places a plate in front of Robert, but he pulls his hand back and frowns. "No, thank you. I don't eat food touched by a maid," Robert says with a smirk. The room goes silent for a moment. David looks at him but says nothing. Aisha stays calm and moves to the next guest, but a hint of sadness flashes in her eyes. As the evening continues, Robert keeps making rude comments. He watches Aisha and shakes his head. "A young girl like you should aim higher, but I guess cleaning houses is all you can do," he says with a laugh. Aisha stays quiet, but Ethan, Robert's son, looks uncomfortable. He tugs on his father's sleeve. "Dad, she's really nice," Ethan whispers. Robert waves his hand. "She's just a maid, son." "Don't get too friendly," he says, sipping his drink. David's wife, Emily, sighs. "Aisha is part of this house, Robert. She's like family to us." Robert chuckles. "Family? She's just a worker. You treat her too well." He leans back in his chair, shaking his head. The night goes on, but an uneasy feeling fills the room. No one knows that soon Robert will regret every word he has said. The night is cold, and the wind blows softly outside. The adults sit in the living room, talking and sipping warm drinks. Ethan, Robert's young son, gets bored. He looks out the window and sees the backyard covered in snow. His eyes light up with excitement. He sneaks outside, stepping onto the snowy ground. He laughs as he kicks the snow and runs around. Then he notices the frozen pond at the edge of the yard. The ice looks smooth and shiny. Curious, he steps closer. Ethan takes one small step onto the ice. Nothing happens. He giggles and takes another step. The ice holds him. Feeling brave, he walks further. But then, crack! The ice makes a sharp sound. Ethan freezes in place. His smile disappears. Suddenly, the ice breaks under his feet. Crash! Ethan falls into the freezing water. He screams, but his voice is weak against the cold air. He splashes, trying to stay above the surface. His small hands grab at the ice, but it keeps breaking. Inside the house, Aisha hears a faint splash. Her heart races. She rushes to the window and gasps. "Ethan!" she shouts. Without thinking, she runs outside. The cold air stings her skin, but she doesn't stop. Inside, the adults finally notice something is wrong. David jumps to his feet. "Where's Ethan?" Robert looks around, confused. Then he hears Aisha scream. His face turns pale. "My son!" he yells, running toward the door. But Aisha is already there, racing toward the pond. The icy water is pulling Ethan down. He gasps for air, his tiny hands barely above the surface. The night has turned into a nightmare. Aisha runs as fast as she can. The cold wind burns her face. But she doesn't stop. She reaches the pond and sees Ethan struggling in the freezing water. His tiny hands slap against the ice, but he can't pull himself up. His face is pale, and his lips are turning blue. Without wasting a second, Aisha steps onto the ice. Crack! The ice makes a sharp sound, but she doesn't hesitate. She lowers herself and crawls forward carefully. "Ethan, hold on! I'm coming!" she shouts. Ethan's eyes are filled with fear. I can't," he cries, shivering. His body is weak, and he's sinking deeper. Aisha moves closer. The ice shakes under her weight. She stretches her arm as far as she can. "Grab my hand, Ethan. You can do it," she says firmly. Ethan tries but slips. His head dips under the water for a second. Aisha's heart pounds. She knows she doesn't have much time. Without thinking, she lowers her body more and reaches further. "Ethan, look at me. Just one more try," she encourages him. With all his strength, Ethan lifts his shaking hand. Aisha grabs it tightly. "I got you," she shouts. Slowly, she pulls him up. The ice cracks louder, threatening to break, but Aisha doesn't let go. Inch by inch, she drags Ethan onto solid ice. Finally, she pulls him close and wraps her arms around him. "You're safe now," she whispers. Ethan coughs and clings to her, shaking. At that moment, Robert and David reach the pond. Robert's eyes widen in shock. His son is alive because of Aisha. Robert stands frozen, unable to speak. He watches as Aisha holds his son Ethan close to her chest. Ethan is shivering, but he's breathing again. His blue lips slowly begin to regain color. Robert's mind races. The woman he had mocked and disrespected all evening has just saved his son's life. He steps forward, his legs shaking. His eyes meet Aisha's. She's still holding Ethan, her arms wrapped tightly around him to keep him warm. Her face is tired, but there's no anger in her eyes, only calm. Ethan looks up at his father, still trembling, and whispers, "She saved me, Dad." His voice is weak, but the words are clear. Robert opens his mouth, but no words come out. He's never felt so ashamed. All the things he had said to Aisha, all the rude comments and insults, they suddenly feel meaningless. David walks up to him, his face serious. "This is why we don't treat people like that, Robert," he says quietly. "Aisha is not just a maid. She's part of this family, and she just gave her all to save your son." Robert looks at Aisha again. Her eyes are kind, even after everything. He feels the weight of his actions. He finally takes a deep breath. I'm sorry," he mutters. Aisha looks at him but doesn't answer. She gently lays Ethan down on the ground, making sure he's safe. Robert stands behind her, not knowing what else to say. The silence hangs in the cold air, but it's a different kind of silence now, one of understanding. David rushes to Aisha and Ethan. He kneels beside them, checking to make sure Ethan is okay. "He's breathing, thank God," David says, relieved. Robert stands behind him, his face pale and full of shock. He looks at Aisha, who is holding his son, and then down at Ethan, who is shivering but safe. The anger and fear in Robert's eyes slowly turn into guilt. He had mocked Aisha only hours ago. Now, she is the reason his son is alive. David stands up and turns to Robert. His voice is calm but firm. "Robert, you owe Aisha an apology. She didn't have to save Ethan. She could have stayed inside, but she didn't. She risked her own life to pull him out of that water. Robert opens his mouth to speak, but stops. He looks down at Aisha, the same woman he insulted earlier. His face reddens with shame. David continues, "You called her a maid, but in this house, we see her as family. She's just as important as any of us. What she did tonight was more than what anyone else could have done." Robert looks at Aisha, who is still holding Ethan. He feels small, realizing how wrong he was. Slowly, he steps forward, his voice soft. "Aisha, I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said." Aisha doesn't answer right away. She looks at him, her eyes tired but calm. "It's okay," she says quietly. "I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because it was the right thing." Robert nods slowly. He now understands. The lesson is clear. People are more than what they do for a living. They are worthy of respect. And tonight, Aisha showed him what true courage looks like. The night calms down. Inside the warm house, everyone gathers around the fireplace. Ethan is wrapped in a blanket, still shivering but safe. Aisha sits next to him, making sure he's comfortable. Robert stands nearby, looking at her. The shame in his eyes has softened. He now sees Aisha not just as the maid, but as someone who saved his son's life. David walks over and pats Robert on the back. "I think we've all learned something tonight," he says, smiling. "Aisha's actions show what real strength and kindness are. We're lucky to have her in our lives." Robert nods, his face filled with regret. He walks over to Aisha and speaks quietly. "I was wrong. You're not just a maid. You're family. Thank you for saving my son." Aisha looks up at him, her face soft but proud. "It's okay," she says with a small smile. "I'm just happy Ethan is safe." Ethan, still wrapped in the blanket, looks up at Aisha with wide eyes. "You're like a superhero," he says shyly. Everyone laughs, the tension in the room lifting. The fire crackles in the background and the warmth of the house feels even stronger now. The lesson of the night is clear. Kindness and bravery come in all shapes, and every person deserves respect. As the evening continues, the holiday spirit fills the house once again, but now with a deeper meaning. They all know that family isn't just about blood. It's about how we treat each other. And Aisha, the woman who risked her life for a child, is now truly seen for who she is, a hero. We hope you enjoyed this story and learned a lesson. For more related stories, please subscribe our channel. And don't forget to like, share, and comment. Thanks for watching.